All right, guys, we are over here in After Effects, and man, I am just excited to be back on here with y'all, creating and learning and just seeing what cool stuff we can come up with in AE. So as usual, we are in our default layout and with the blank canvas here in After Effects. And let's go ahead and create a new composition. So I'm going to go right here to new composition, and I'm going to name this composition base. And let's change the width to 1920, height 1080. So we're just in HD here, square pixels, 30 frames per second. And let's keep this at 10 seconds long for the duration for this loop. So background color at black is fine. Let's hit OK. And now we have our base composition. So all we're going to do in here is create a shape layer that's going to run this whole loop. So we're going to get into a couple things like making groups that we haven't done before. So that'll be cool. To see how that works within shape layers as well. So in my base composition here, I'm going to go to Layer, New, Shape Layer, or I can right click in my timeline here, New Shape Layer, and we have our blank shape layer created. Nothing's inside of this yet. So I'm going to twirl this down and Contents, Add. Let's click Add and go to Rectangle. And that's going to create our rectangle path. So I'm going to twirl that down. The size, let's keep that 100 by 100. The position, I'm going to change the Y to -25. And the roundness, I'm going to change this to 200. And this will kind of create an ellipse basically, but I just like the control we have over it with the roundness here. So let's twirl up our rectangle path, come back to Add, Stroke. And we have our stroke one here. I'm going to twirl that down. And we're going to keep the color at white, but I'm just going to drop this to 1 on the stroke width. That's all we need to do there. And then I'm going to come back to Add one more time. I'm going to go to Repeater. So we have our Repeater 1. Let's twirl that down. And on my copies, I'm going to bump this all the way up to 50. And we're going to do our animation here, so with this offset. But before we do that, let's twirl down Transform Repeater 1. Make sure it's Transform Repeater 1 and not Transform. And let's change the position from 100 to 0 on the X. And the scale, I want to bump this all the way up to 125%. And that's all we're going to do there. So let's twirl up Transform Repeater 1. And with our playhead at 0 frames, 0 seconds, I'm going to hit the stopwatch on offset here. And let's start at -30. And then I'm going to take my playhead all the way to the end of the 10-second mark and go -20. I want to maybe give this a little more depth. So twirl down Transform Repeater 1. And in the rotation here, I'm just going to bump this up to 10 degrees. You know, it kind of adds that angle to it, which gives it a more visual look of that tunnel, which I like. So if I play through that, yeah, a little more like hypnotic sci-fi-y, which is really cool. So let's keep that there. Let's twirl up Transform, twirl up Repeater 1. Next thing we're going to do is under our contents again, let's go to Add and Group Empty. And that's just going to add an empty group. I'm going to drag that above the rectangle path. And we're just going to do a couple things within this group and then duplicate it. So the first thing I'm going to do with that group 1 selected, let's hit Enter and rename this Twist. And I'm going to twirl down this twist here, and all we have is a transform. And with twist selected, I'm going to go to Add, Path. And we're adding a path to this, so we have a path 1. And with that path 1 selected, you can see with this selected here, you can see that it brings up our pen tool, and that's what we want there. So all we're going to do with this path, and we can adjust this in the settings a little bit, but I'm just going to come down to this general area of this bottom left corner and draw the smallest little line, and that looks good. So you can see it's hitting that repeater. So if I zoom in here, you can see this line is, this little line is duplicating itself, which is what we want. We don't want this position, obviously, but let's change that real quick. So zoom back out, bring this to the center. And we have path 1 here. I'm going to come back up to Add and add Gradient Stroke. Let's twirl down Gradient Stroke. And our start point, let's go to -325 by -300. On our end point, let's keep that at 100 on the X, and then on the Y, we'll change that to 100 as well. Everything else looks good here. Here's where this is really going to come into play is the stroke width. We're going to take this from 2 all the way up to 1350, so 1350. And it kind of gives us that blade shape coming out, which is what we want. It's a little too thick for us here, so let's twirl down our taper right underneath that. And on our start length, I'm going to change that to 100%. Let's twirl up taper. And looking at this too, if I zoom in here, you can see these little gaps right here, which I don't necessarily want. I don't think it would affect it too much, but I kind of want to clean that up a little. So all we have to do there is we have our path right here that we made. I'm just going to select that endpoint right there and kind of move that to where I close those gaps. So it should be super easy for you to do that as well. So let's just tweak that until it closes right about there. I like that. So it kind of has that flush edge right there. This side won't, but this side will, and that's kind of what we want because we're losing this in the shadows, which is fine. I'm going to twirl up my gradient stroke, and so this is what our whole twist group looks like. We have a path one, a gradient stroke one, and then our transform twist. So let's twirl up our twist and select that. And what I'm going to do with this twist now is hit Command or Control D, depending on which platform you're on. And it's going to duplicate that once. And then I'm going to hit that again and duplicate it twice. So we have twist, twist 2, and twist 3. And this is exactly what we want. So let's twirl down twist 2. And all we need to do on this is twirl down transform twist 2 and play with this rotation. And let's just tweak this to where it kind of centers itself up. So we're probably going to need to play around with this a little bit so that we get what we want. But I'm going to bring this to about 110. It looks like would be a good spot. And then I'm going to twirl down twist 3 and then transform twist 3. And same thing. Let's play with that rotation to where it's centered up. Maybe about right there. So our values may be different on this. Mine looks like it's pretty good at 245. And then I have this one on my twist 2, I have it at, looks like 100 degrees. I think I meant to do 110 there. Yeah, let's do 110. My initial twist here looks pretty good as well. So if I play through this, this is what you're kind of looking at. And I like that a lot. So you can see how I have these kind of blades coming out as they're centered up in the screen. You don't want them to where they're like close together like this because you can see we're getting some intersection here within the shapes. So just find those values where it kind of starts blending in with the shadows. You're going to kind of get these taperings coming off of here, and that looks good to me. So this looks great for now. Let me adjust that just a little bit, maybe 115. Awesome. So I think we're ready to move on to our render comp where we're going to do all the effects and get this thing looking good. So what we can do is twirl up our shape layer, and that is good for this base composition. So let's go to our project panel here, and I'm going to click on create a new composition, and I'm going to name this render because this is going to be our render comp. And then we should have all the same specs throughout. So 1920 by 1080, 30 frames per second, 10 seconds long in duration. Let's hit OK. And the first thing we're going to do with our blank render comp is come up to our project panel and drag our base composition into that render comp. And so now we have this. That looks good. Make sure that's looping correctly, and we're golden. So let's go ahead and get this thing set up so we can add our effects and finish this out. So I'm going to start by creating 4 adjustment layers that we're going to lay our effects on. So you can come up to here, layer, new, adjustment layer. Or in my timeline area here, right-click, new adjustment layer, 1, new adjustment layer, 2, new adjustment layer, 3, and one more time, 4. And your numbers may be different here. This is probably just from my trial and error throughout this tutorial. Yours will probably say 1, 2, 3, 4. And so let's go ahead and rename these adjustment layers. I'm going to name this first one to Blobby. Click on that second adjustment layer, hit enter, and rename this to blur. Next one, let's rename that to color. And the final one, we'll rename that to glow. And these are just all adjacent to what effects we're going to drop on them. This blobby layer, we're going to add a mask to that later on, and I'll show you why, but we will not do that right now, and we'll do that once we get to that point. So let's start with our first effect here. So it's going to be this blobby, which is going to utilize CC Blobbilize. And let's go over to our effects and presets panel. And if you don't have that panel pulled up, you can come over to Window, Effects and Presets, and find it there, and it should pop up. So over in our effects and presets panel, let's type in Blobby, and CC Blobbilize should come up. And with our Blobby layer selected, let's just double click, and that'll automatically apply to it. And it already gives us a cool effect, but we're going to push this further as usual. So I'm going to drop down my blobbiness. In my blob layer, I'm going to select my base composition. The property lightness, that's great. And then the softness, let's drop that to 5. And the cutaway, we're going to drop that to 0. Let's twirl that up. And our light, we're using effect light. That's great. The intensity, let's crank this to 250. Kind of bring those specular highlights in there. Our light height, let's just bump this a little to 70. And our light direction, I'm going to change that to negative 60 degrees. So not too much of a change, but it all matters in the end. So let's go ahead and twirl up our light, twirl down our shading. And all we're going to do is change the ambient to 50 and the diffuse to 35. That's all we need to do on those. We get kind of that metallic-y look to this, which I like, but we're going to make this look even better. So that's all we need to do on that blobby layer. Let's click on blur. I'm going to come over to my effects and presets and type in radial fast, and it should come up with CC radial fast blur. Let's double click on that with our blur layer selected. And you can see it's kind of giving us a zoom effect with those lines coming out. It's a little too much, so I'm going to actually drop this to 25, and we'll keep that at standard. So let's go to color next, and we're going to actually add 2 color effects to this. So let's first come to the effects and presets and type in CC toner, and we'll double click, making sure our color layer is selected. And I'm going to change this from tritone to pentone, and we're going to utilize all these colors here. And so this is where you can kind of do whatever you want, but I'll give you the values that I use to get this same look that I have. So on our highlights, I'm going to click that color box, type in FCF 1D5. And hit OK. On our brights, click that color box, D4 8C 6E, and hit OK. Midtones, color box, 131313. Okay. On our dark tones, 57668F. And on our shadows, let's change that to 2B, 2B, 2B. And hit it OK. And so now we have this nice kind of copper metallic-y look, which is really going to look nice with this loop. So that looks good on our toner. Let's twirl that up in our effect controls. And then coming back over to our effects and presets, I'm going to type in color emboss, and that'll bring up that color emboss. And we'll hit double click that, making sure our color layer is still selected. It should drop right on top of that CC toner. And on the direction, let's go to 0. On the relief, let's change this to 5 and bring that up. And then on the contrast, I'm going to bump that to 150. The direction is what we're going to animate. And if I do this real quick, you can see it kind of gives us that movement within that loop, which is just going to add nicely to the effect. So I'm going to take my playhead to the beginning, 0 frames, 0 seconds. Click that stopwatch on direction and making sure that's at 0 revolutions, 0 degrees. I'm going to take my playhead all the way to the end, 10-second mark, last frame, and just change the revolutions here to 3. So we're going to go 360 degrees 3 different times. So if I play through that, sorry, I can bump my resolution up here a little bit. If I play through that, you can kind of see the lights kind of moving around with this, which really adds nicely to this effect. So that's all we need to do with the color here. I'm going to twirl up color emboss, and let's move on to our glow. And we're going to add 2 effects to this glow. Come over to our effects and presets. Let's type in glow, and we have our glow underneath our stylize. I'm going to double click that, and we're going to add a nice soft glow to this. So we'll keep it at color channels. Let's change this to 90%. The glow radius, let's crank that to 35. And the intensity, I'm just going to bump that to 2. And now we have some nice bright glows here, which looks good. Everything else is fine on this. I'm going to twirl this up, come back over to our effects and presets, and type in levels. Let's double click levels. And all I need to do here is change my gamma to 0.75. We're kind of crunch those blacks, bring those shadows in, and this looks a lot nicer. So here it is with and without. You can see what kind of difference that makes. So if I play through this again, we're getting there real good. So this is where that color emboss is nice. You can see these flashes of light coming through here. These like strands. If I zoom in here. Sorry, this is a lower resolution. I'm going to go full. And if I scrub through here, you can kind of see how that light moves within these ribs a little bit right here, which is a really nice effect. So I like that a lot. This is looking good. So like I said, we're going to come back to our blobby layer to apply a mask to it. But before we do that, why we need to do that is because we're going to add kind of a light behind this by using a solid. So let's come down to our timeline area, or you can go to Layer, New, Solid. Come down here and right-click New, Solid, and we're going to add a solid to this. And I'm just going to name this Light. And make comp size just to make sure we're on the same composition, and then the color is black. That's great. And I'm going to drag that underneath every layer, including my base layer. And if I turn that off, you can kind of see how this is affecting the composition already. So what's nice is using this solid is I'm going to add a fill effect here, generate fill. And let's change this value. Let's hit that color box. Go FFCB26. Hit OK. If I turn that on and off, you can see what kind of difference that makes. Really brightens things up. The problem is that this blobby CC layer is taking over and inserting black into all this area, which should be this light. So this is where we need that mask. This looks kind of cool in itself, but the light looks a little bit better with it behind it. So with this blobby layer selected, I'm going to come up to my shape layers here and my masking and go to ellipse tool. And that'll give me my ellipse tool, which you should be able to see here with the black dot in the white square. And let's go directly in the center of the composition. And I'm going to click and hold down Command and drag outwards. And I'm holding Command Shift, by the way. Sorry. And just get an ellipse that kind of fills that the whole screen. We don't need to go outside of the bounds here, but maybe right to the top, right about there. And right now it's inverted, and we want to keep the black on the outsides here and have the light coming from the center. So all we need to do for that is hit inverted, and that switches our black back to the outside and brings the light back to the middle here. And obviously this is very harsh and large here, so I'm going to twirl down mask 1. And on my mask feather, let's change this to 500 pixels and really fan that out. That's looking a lot better. And then the mask expansion, let's go to -215 and kind of crunch that back in there. And this looks good. So the reason why I like using this mask expansion is because if I want to, I can, make this larger or smaller depending on kind of the look I want. And you can see how much that even affects this layer. So I'm going to keep that at -215, which looks nice. If I zoom in here, you can kind of see we're losing a lot of detail here, and that's from the blur. And I want to take care of that. So there's not really anything we need to adjust within the effect itself. I'm going to click on my blur adjustment layer. And go to effects. You can see there's really nothing we're going to do with this, because if we just continue to blur that, we're going to blur it too much. What I can do, though, I'm going to twirl it blobby, and I'm going to go to my blending modes here. And if you don't see those, come down to toggle switches and modes until you see this little panel pop up that says mode. And I'm going to click on that and just go to darker color. And you can see now we kind of get that definition back within these lines, which is really nice. And that's all we needed to do. And so if I play through this, you can kind of see what we're getting here. We have the fill layer back here providing that light and also giving a twist as well. We have this coming at us, a lot of that movement within these blades here and in the shadows and speculars, which is super nice, adds a lot to that effect. You can kind of get lost in this loop for sure. So, you can come through here and make different adjustments. If I come back to my base layer, and I twirl down my shape layer, I'm going to twirl at my twist 3, twist 2. And, you have these little paths. And so if I twirl down twist and go to path, we can also kind of move these around, which is super nice. So what's nice about these paths is that they're so flexible. So even if I kind of bring this over and move the positions here, you see how deep those shadows are getting and how smooth that is. So, maybe let's do that across the board a little here. Kind of play with this. Let's bring this down. You can kind of see these adjustments that we're making. which makes it, just gives it a lot more dimension here. So blades, and if I come back to render, you can see now how that works. So literally just tweaking the littlest things gives you whole different looks through here. And so your results are going to kind of vary, which I think makes this loop really cool, is that it automatically becomes your own look and style. So if you come over to your project panel, if you're not over here, you can come up to project panel, and you can see where this says 8 bits per channel. You can look at the glows and kind of the lights and speculars and see the fall off's a little harsh. And what we can do is click on that, and that brings up our project settings. If you go to bit depth and bring this to 32 bits per channel, I'm going to hit OK. You can see how those glows kind of bloom a little more, and the fall off is a lot more gradual and smooth. And that just adds kind of another layer and level of cleanliness and maybe professionalism to your project. I do this a lot with, especially when I'm working with glows and things like that, where I have a lot of light in the scene. It just gives it a lot cleaner look. What that will do is affect your render time a little bit, but it is definitely worth it in the end, kind of that finishing touch to your project. So that is it, guys, for this tutorial. Like I said, a super fun look. I love how this really turned out. I can't wait to see what you guys come up with for this. So as always, you can hit me up over on Instagram at Timmy Dwyer. I haven't been active on there much either, as I've been kind of taking a break and enjoying time with the family. But I will start getting active over there again. So tag me in these, show me what you're making. You can also message me on there if you have any questions, or just say what's up. I'd love to hear in the comments as well underneath the video. If you guys need any help with this, or you have any suggestions for future tutorials, or just to say hi. I love interacting with you guys in there as well. So you can find this project file on my store over at radloops.com. You can also find some free textures that I dropped a while back. Super useful for your projects. I have a lot more coming as well. I actually have a new texture pack in the works, and I'm excited to share that with you guys as well. So go over to my store, get what you need, this tutorial, past tutorials, different loops and things like that. But other than that, I'm excited for the next one. Thank you guys for following along. And until the next tutorial, you all have the best day.